Hey everyone from Fairbanks, Alaska. It's 5:30 in the morning, so I got up at 4 this morning to get prepared for this. So that's how much I care about this right now. It's 2 inches of snow, so if you're from Eielson or you're from Fairbanks, your spouses are going to be upset at you. So, so what Charlie and Megan asked me to do was, so we ran our own Next Jump Leadership Academy pseudo at Eielson this summer. And so he wanted me to run you through kind of the case study of how we went about doing that and just the differences and the nuances. And to tell you the truth, I'll share with you what I've learned. But just to start it off, can anyone hear me okay? I just want to make sure. Some thumbs up. Okay, great. I remember being you 18 months ago, day 3 of Next Jump Academy, and like just looking around and looking at this place, and like it's a weird place. I've never seen a place like Next Jump. I've seen places similar, but not quite like that. And the best word I could use to describe it was, man, this feels very cultish. But I also know that like high performing teams are usually considered cultish kind of atmospheres. So I knew it was something special. I go into every school opportunity with an open mind, and I take lots of notes, and then I try to judge it afterwards because I don't want to critically judge during the school. I sat down with the Eisman team and try to work that through them, because even on day 3, what I heard a lot of my teammates at the Next Jump Academy say, hey, this won't scale at my place. This works because of this. This works because of that. Meaning that it only is going to work in that kind of atmosphere. And I didn't want to take that as an answer. The best question I always ask myself was like, under what conditions will this work? And so I took that kind of attitude, and I've never been to New York City. So Saturday I flew out, Saturday night I flew out. So Saturday I walked about 20 miles through New York, trying to figure out what I had just been through at Next Jump. And, you know, I'm walking around thinking about feedback and Charlie, how the visceral feedback that I got. And I'd be like, hey, is that where Harry met Sally? Because like we kind of grew up in New York City through the TV and walking through Central Park, and every chase scene that I'd ever seen, you know, Will Smith or Elf or whatever running through Central Park. It was interesting. And as I walked through this, I really come to the conclusion that what Next Jump felt like to me was a sports team. That's what it felt like to me. Because I'm big on development, but Next Jump is developing their people faster than I was. And it's because it's baked into the culture, right? And I had been doing book clubs and all kinds of things to develop people, but it wasn't necessarily baked into the culture. And I wasn't taking as many opportunities as I could to squeeze the juice out of every situation. Their 10Xs, their open feedback, everything like that. And so the closest thing I could relate it to is when I played sports. I played baseball and basketball, and man, game on. Whenever you were at practice, everything was eligible for feedback, right? Coaches were getting into you, your teammates were getting into you, because they were clear on the mission and everyone wanted to get better. So that was my goal, to try to figure out, man, how do I bring this sports-like environment of feedback to Eielson, to Davis-Monthan when I was there. And so basically, how do I create my own developmental gym? And using the tools and principles that I learned there, because they're working there. And like Charlie said, man, I am action-oriented. I don't know if he talked about it, but he had, they talk about you can only change an organization 2% at a time. That's hard for me. Like I really want to change fast. And so, and that's bit me in the butt, to tell you the truth, a few times up here. But we'll get to that in a second. So how do I create this developmental gym? Well, first of all, book club wasn't going to do it, right? It wasn't. Once a month, once a week, meeting with 4 people, yada, yada, yada. It wasn't going to do it. So I didn't have anything better. So I took the tools that I learned there. I wrote them down, the coaching, The anonymous feedback, I'll talk about how I get that in a second. They're 10Xs. I, you ran through maybe meditation a little bit. I don't know. Yoga, gratitude, what's working, what's not working. I don't know if you did all these, but, and then just actually LHF, there's just lying, hiding, and faking. And I don't know if they still give out books, but I recommend, highly recommend. I read it on the way home from that class, was in Everyone Culture. It's written, Next Jump is one of the people in that book, one of the 3 deliberately developmental organizations. And it gave me a term that, along with lying, hiding, faking, the second job. The second job, Robert Keegan posits that we spend up to 60% of our time at work worried about our reputation versus worried about how fast we're growing. And so cultures are created to, and it's just like, you don't want to look silly in front of your boss. So you spend hours preparing for stuff that doesn't matter just so you don't look silly. And you're not actually getting your work and mission done because you're worried about the second job, this reputation. How do I get promoted? And so that book lays that out very well. And that's what Next Jump gets after, is no lying, hiding, faking. Be real, and let's work on the real person. So I come back from Next Jump, and I have to start implementing these tools because they're baked into their culture and they're not baked into our culture, which I don't know, your levels at your businesses and work there at New York and Boston. If you're the leader of the company, like Charlie, you can start to make these cultural things like embedded in yours. But if you're like most of us, we're middle managers at some point. And so I don't have the ability to change like policy and processes per se, but I have the ability to use these tools. So that was what I focused on, creating a developmental gym using these tools. And so I couldn't teach, even though I wanted to share these principles, I couldn't teach it without having done it. So I spent, it took me a lot longer than hopefully it'll take you, but it took me about a year of working through feedback. I see a couple of my coaching people in that class, Jeff and Stefan, and trying to nug out, like, just do, right? And it did not always go well. And we'll talk about that as I go through the lessons, but it just didn't go well. Like, when you're trying something new, I mean, that's what we're trying to get at, right? When you're trying something new, it just doesn't always go well. You can only plan out so much, right? And as we say in the military, the enemy has a vote. The situation has a vote as you're moving forward. So I spent about a year implementing all of these tools, and then I decided I had enough information to be able to start our own little leadership academy. That's what we called it at Eielson. And so, but one thing I couldn't do is, one of the unique things about being there at Next Jump is that it's kind of voyeuristic a little bit. I mean, you're inside their company, looking at their processes, looking at how they do things. I mean, you got plants behind you, you're eating all their food. It's just, I can't recreate that, right? So I had to create a different kind of framework because even though I had implemented these tools, let's go back to that 2% rule. I can't change an organization, not to exactly be like Next Jump, but to be developmental like that in 8 months. Just it's, well, maybe you can, I couldn't. So I had to base my Next Jump Academy pseudo on something different. And I chose the culture code because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about culture code. We're talking about culture. And so the 4 lines of effort I had in my my Next Jump Academy was building safety, sharing, vulnerability, establishing purpose, and then the third was self-care. I think you guys might have my after action report. Yes or no?
You do, Josh.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna go through that in just a second. But so something else I learned, this is anyways. So sharing versus teaching. And this is why I think you have to go through the hard work of doing this. So, I was a senior NCO Academy instructor. So the highest school at that time for senior NCOs in the Air Force, I taught at it. And I was a pretty badass instructor. At least that's what I thought. And no, I was. I worked on my craft and I worked really hard. And but it was funny as I was getting feedback at the academy. The most impactful moments I made on my students is when I messed up. When I had to stand up in front of them and be like, hey, well, let's talk through this. And I fumbled my way through. And the reason I know this is because as I sit up there and I'd weave lesson principles together masterfully, like a superior instructor, like that's never what I got feedback on. It was always, man, you really changed my life based on this. And that was something I completely messed up. And I really learned from that example about authenticity and sharing. And I'll use this story real quick to share that. So I was a production superintendent, which means I just run the mission. A few years ago, I run the mission. So like I was a maintainer, so aircraft maintenance. So making sure the aircraft are properly configured and gas and fueled and just ready to go. And so we had an issue, and I kind of got onto one of these. So I was an E7 or E8 at the time. He was an E6. I thought he was being lazy, and I told him, "Hey, you will do this. Go out and do this," and because I wanted to get the mission done. Lo and behold, I was wrong. He was right, and so it was eating crow. But I went down there to that tech sergeant, and I was like, hey, listen, bro, my bad. I'm very sorry. I should not have been that way. I was feeling pressure for trying to get this mission done, but you're absolutely right. And that was it. So 3.5 years later, I was just acquaintances with that guy. I was getting ready to leave. I had just gotten back. I was getting ready to leave that assignment, go to a different assignment. I had just gotten back from Afghanistan. I'd been there for 8-9 months. So I hadn't even been in the unit, and I heard he was retiring. So I showed up a little late to his retirement. I stood in the back, and I remember, it's an phenomenal moment, right? I remember standing in the back, and over a course of 20 years, he thanked 2 people in his life. He thanked his dad, and he thanked me. And he didn't even know I was in the room. And he said, at the time, he said, Senior Master Sergeant Hurt was the only senior NCO that's ever apologized to me for doing something that he knew was wrong. And I couldn't believe that. Like, this man's been with hundreds and thousands of people over his career, and he thanked me. And that was one of my worst moments. And you fast forward to the Senior NCO Academy. And so what I knew going into this academy is that it needed to be sharing and not teaching. And so that's why you have to go, in my opinion, you have to go through the rigors of this. You just do. And I think more people learn in your failures than will learn in your successes, right? So so that's kind of the mindset that I had going into this academy. So hey, and I'll appreciate any feedback as well. And if we're gonna have time at the end for questions, so if you have questions, just write them down. So I use Culture Code as a framework, and I built it upon that because I couldn't get Next Jump that kind of voyeuristic. So I wanted to be authentic, and I wanted to teach them the tools to build their own developmental gyms. And I wanted to do it so they didn't have to change the policies and procedures necessarily, like big company, corporate kind of decisions. They could just do it. And so those were the things that I decided. And one of the cool things at Next Jump was all the little like treats and food and the sports, or the do you guys like do the sleep class and all that kind of stuff? Nod if you did or not. Yeah. So I tried to add a little bit of that. That's why self-care was the 4th bullet, which is super important. So let me show these people the tools, and then we'll go forward. So if you now I'll go into how I decided to teach it. So if you go to that after action report, so at the bottom of that first page is the course schedule. So we'll go through that in a little more detail. But so it was a 3-day course, day 1, day 2, day 3. I still have my normal job going on. I was the main instructor in it because I was the one that did all the experimentation and had all the stories. So that was very hard with my job because I have a lot of stuff to do. So I had to work that out. I use the Culture Code as the main book, but all those reference books on the next page are basically what helped shape this. Some reference videos. We'll talk about the Brene Brown Call to Courage, and some meditation apps and things like that. All right, if you go to page 3 now, we're going to get down into the lesson breakdown. So who I was teaching what we consider, so E6 is transitioning to E7. What we call that is the Senior and CO Professional Enhancement Seminar. So what these people are doing is they're moving from supervisor of individual contributors to now being leaders of teams. So they have, these senior and COs can have anywhere between 10 and 150 people underneath them. And so, but they're at the right frame in their career that they can really affect a culture of a specific unit. So we thought it was a perfect opportunity to talk about how do you build a developmental culture that uses Developmental Gym. So day 1, lesson 1, trying to set it up. Basically, I'm not ashamed of this. I stole everything I could from Next Jump, right? So I did what I think Charlie maybe did with y'all. I have no idea, but what he did with us is day 1, lesson 1, he kind of stood up on the whiteboard and wrote down the information age versus the industrial age. Did he do that with y'all? Okay, so I did that, a little different take, but basically I had pages and pages of notes from Next Jump, and so I kind of went through that. So I talked to them about, so let's also talk about this, right? Hard skills versus soft skills. I hate that term. It's like hard skills, like technical skills, and human skills. So if you have any job that requires human interaction, human skills are important. And so that's basically every job, it's basically our whole life. So I really try to bake that in, that these are just as important as your technical skills. Because brilliant jerks, I think that term's been probably brought up. So so I went through the difference between the industrial age and information age and where we're going. In the book, In Everyone Culture, they talk about the adult mind and the growth of where we need to go through our development. And then I talked about turning our organization into this developmental gym, just like they do there with the self-awareness. Like, that's not new, but like when you walk around Next Jump, I even heard them in the presentation before, right? They're talking about their forehand and backhand, and it's just common terms, right? Everyone knows everyone's weakness and strengths, just like a sports team. And so I talked about that, and that gets at that second job, which is Ray Dalio said, be more concerned with how fast you're growing than you are with your reputation. And so the second job of trying to make sure your boss only sees a specific part of you, and how that really affects just day in, day out. And this was the only lecture of the course. I used a whiteboard because they asked me for slides, and I didn't take any pictures. So that's my fault. So, but I didn't know I was doing this. So that was the breakdown and the setup for the whole course. The rest of the course was teaching, or not teaching, sharing tools that I had done and then making them do it. So lesson 2, if you look there, it says Chief Smart is retirement. That's something I had to do. And I just brought them along. But if I was to do this over again, I would bring the Brene Brown video. Anyone seen that on Netflix? Raise your hands. Yeah, so it's phenomenal. I've watched it like 3 times. I cry like a baby with my wife every time. So I encourage you, if you have a significant other or spouse, go sit on the couch, hold hands, and watch this video. And it'll change how you share with your significant other. So, but I'll get to that when I get to it in the lesson. And so by that time, it took us up to lunch. And now, so this was a big portion of it because I think Next Jump hits on this, and I think every company in the world does, and the Air Force does. I know the Navy, probably Coast Guard, everywhere. Nutrition is important. What the calories we feed our brain help us make better decisions, right? So our brain processes almost 25% of our calories. That's crazy. This little nugget up here takes 25% of your calories. So if you're like me, I'm having to fight young ones eating Snickers and Mountain Dew, and then coming into work trying to make good decisions, right? Hopped up on all these highs and lows. So I used it as a little niche. Some of the things we're trying to work here is trying to get people to try a whole food plant-based diet, which is like heresy in Alaska because the people that come to Alaska, they want to hunt, right? They want to kill and eat meat. So we used it as a little bit of a niche, and we fed them. We fed them nutritious breakfasts and lunch, whole food plant-based. And but we also had nutrition discussions. And side note, I had more people in my organization come up to me after this lesson and get frustrated with me because their senior NCOs went back to their organizations and radicalized their snack bars. They got rid of the Twinkies, and so yeah, I have open feedback. I get feedback all the time. Chief, what are you doing? I don't got any more tornadoes and Mountain Dew. Like they threw it all out, and now it's water and fig bars. I mean, so they're pissed at me, but hopefully they're making better decisions. Anyways, so we really focused on that, and that was a self-care kind of event. All right, so and I'll discuss my journey a little bit here. So we went into feedback. So in the culture code, they talk about feedback and the growth. They talk about feedback there. So what I've learned over this last year is who there has an open door policy if you're a leader, right? Like, yeah. Go ahead, raise your hands. Yeah, so people can come and talk to you, and yeah, I've had an open door policy too. And hey man, I think I'm pretty like open, and people can come talk to me. Once I instituted anonymous feedback, and I'll share with you how I did that. Like I get hundreds of comments of how bad I am at things, how good I am at things. But the funny thing is I don't get those verbally, none of it. And I tried. Hey, give me some feedback. Oh, Chief, you're doing great. Constructive feedback. I think you're working too hard. You might burn yourself out. Like it's all this like nonsense. And not nonsense, but it's not hard hitting. Once I instituted anonymous feedback, real deal happened. And so I hear this a lot from my senior NCOs in the military. Is like, but I don't like it. It gives people an easy way out. We need to build this confrontation culture that, we're able to do that. Yeah, I completely agree. I just don't know if I'm able to do that. I don't know if I have the chops to be able to build that confrontation culture. Anonymous feedback, and I think the science shows it, is the only way you're going to truly get the feedback you need. And it sucks because I see leaders fail all the time because they didn't know. And so this anonymous feedback is what I was trying to teach them. And the way I do it is, since I don't have the app from NextJump, I use SurveyMonkey, which actually kind of works out great for us. If you don't know, I send out all of my surveys are 2 questions or less usually. Hey, did you, some kind of way to get a quantitative data? Did you like this, yes or no? And what's one constructive thing? For like feedback for myself, what's one constructive thing that Chief Hurt could work on, right? And I get hundreds and hundreds of comments, but I got to make it fast, and I got to give them time to do it. So I send out that survey. I make a QR code so they can scan it with their phones and everything. And what I really liked about it, and I'll talk about this here, is that I get the feedback. And so feedback's for the mature, right? I get to decide, but I get trending feedback. And so that helps me. I got the 4 things I'm trying to work on now. But what I really like about it is what I saw with NextJump is they built this into their culture. I don't know if all of our organization cultures are ready for this radically open feedback, right? You got to work yourself into it. And so what I've seen is now I do this with my people I rate on and senior NCOs. People at New York, I've done this with them. Hey, give Sergeant Hansen or give Stefan some feedback. All that feedback comes to me. And now I get to read it and I get to sit down with him. And if there are any trolls out there, guess what I can do? I can just delete it, right? Hey, go kill yourself or anything like that. And you hope your organization isn't like that. I haven't had too many, but there have been some trolls, right? And so it allows me to filter it a little bit. But one thing it has changed the way that I'm a supervisor is, I don't know about your organizations, but our organizations are built on supervisor, ratee kind of thing. Supervisor gives feedback to the ratee has to sit there and accept it. I've never quite liked that because I really have to filter through, hey man, I think that's how you operate. That's not how I can lead. Or is that a personal opinion? Like I have to filter through a whole bunch of garbage, of noise to try to get to the real nuggets of feedback. What I have seen is instead of me being the supervisor giving them feedback, now I have all this feedback from their peers and I give it to them. And I'll just tell you, like 90% of it is what I would want to give them anyways. And so now I sit down and I give them the feedback and I was like, how do you feel about this? What do you think? How? And so instead of me being the person giving them the harsh feedback, now what am I? I'm a coach. I can help them grow through this feedback and be like, yeah, I see that. And so it's not just one person's opinion anymore. It gets out of that nonsense. And so that's what I got into this feedback intro. So I talked with them how feedback should work. And then we went into and observe and give feedback. And you guys did that, right? Nod your heads. Yep. So we did the same thing using SurveyMonkey. We had a person get up and give a 5-minute brief presentation. And me and Sergeant Hansen, Stefan Hansen at New York, we were the judges. And so the students gave feedback and then me and Sergeant Hansen gave verbal feedback, and then we read through the feedback. And it was great to see this, right? Because feedback elicits a response in us, right? It's no matter what it is, it's in our lizard brain, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. And you could see the students in the front of the room that were getting the feedback like change colors. So it was really good to talk through how to give feedback. But I will say, just like everything, they were always more focused on the technical. That's why I love this open feedback, because we need more feedback on human skills, not our technical skills. But technical skills are usually yes and no, right and wrong. Hey, that was supposed to be 5 millimeters and you made it 10 millimeters, whatever it is. You're supposed to use a 0, you used a 1. So there's a very big right and wrong. And that's what we feel comfortable with giving feedback. And I'm trying to teach these senior NCOs to develop how to give human feedback, attitudes, values, passions, all these kind of things. So that's what we spend a lot of time on. Then went through the recap and then the fitness. So I made them do fitness. You're in the Air Force. They should do fitness. Yeah, well, a lot of people do, they go run or whatever. I made them choose between a spin class and a CrossFit body weight kind of workout. And they all enjoyed it and it was fantastic. But I forced them to try something new. And that was good. So the next day, so now we're into lesson 8, intro to coaching. So we talked about coaching and trying to help people remove masks and be the same person at home and at work. And I'll tell you, I get a lot of pushback on this, right? What do you mean? I don't want to be the same person at home and I'm at work. Well, you can't be two people. You spend too much energy trying to be two people. And you're putting on masks. And I'm sure Charlie and Megan and Greg and Tom have all these data, but like the amount of energy it takes to run two different people is exhausting. And so we're really trying to get them. So our coaching is like they're talking partners. And so we talked about that, and how I do coaching, how we did coaching there is what I did for this class is, this is why I think you got to do it, is I brought in 4 people that I coached, and we sat down and had a coaching session right in the middle of the class. And the deal was, what's one thing you're struggling with at work, and what's one thing you're struggling with at home? That's the coaching session. And all 4 of the students went through that, or all 4 of the coaching went through that. And then we had an out brief. And what's funny is all of my coaching people are outranked the people in the room. And I was super proud of my coaching partners because they were vulnerable. They shared. I mean, they didn't share as deep as they usually do, right? Because you're in a room full of 40 strangers. But they shared, and the students could not believe that these senior enlisted leaders had struggles similar to them. It's crazy, right? We think our leaders are infallible. And I'm just telling you, I'll get to the end when it really came out, but that was I got more feedback on that than anything. Like, Chief Hurt, you struggle with communication with your wife? Yeah, man, I got a full-blown case of life. It's just the way it is. Life's easy to talk and very hard to walk. So that was powerful. So we went through the coaching session, and then we had an out brief. If I was to do this over again, the out brief would have lasted a lot longer than it did, because there were so many questions. All right. Did you guys do a what's working, what's not working? Okay. This is something that has taken off at our base. I mean, I'm about ready to go to an offsite today, and we're going to do it again. I've probably done it 100 times since I've been here at Eielson. For y'all, if you ain't doing something similar at your work, like, I encourage you to do it. From the lowest level, we take our lowest level airmen and make them do this, to our highest level. And what we've started uncovering is that when we outbrief the boss, my boss, Colonel Bishop, and like, he's getting perspective from all levels, which is very interesting, right? Because sometimes they converge and sometimes they are way off. So the senior leaders are worried about this problem. The junior leaders are worried about some speed bumps at the gate. You know what I mean? Like, it's just funny to get through, and you're like, that's what you're worried about? I can make that happen and fix it. So we did what's working, what's not working, just like they did at Next Jump. We ran through what's not working and what's working. Then we had them vote, and then I showed them how to use that in their organizations, in their flights of their 10 to 50 to 60 people. And what that does is it gets the people, obviously, to prioritize problems, but it also gets the people to own the problems. And so that was giving them a tool. So we've already talked about feedback, anonymous feedback. We've talked about coaching, and we talked about what's working, what's not working. These are tools that they could implement. I showed them how to do it the next day. All right. So something I didn't think would go as well as it did was the mindfulness, lesson 12, the mindfulness, reflective journaling, and the obituary. So as weird as it is, anyone heard of the app Headspace or Calm or anything? It's a meditation. So I had a room of 40 students. We sat there and we listened to my Headspace app and did a 10-minute meditation. And I thought they would like throw it out the door, but they actually liked it. But we set it up with switching costs. If you don't know about switching costs, the one thing, or we lose a lot we can't multitask, right? There's all kinds of data that shows we can't multitask. It just slows us down. And the amount of time we lose by doing switching costs, by changing your mind, is enormous. Or changing from thing to thing, it taxes. And so mindfulness allows us to focus. It allows us to shut the computer screens down that are open in our brain. So the 100 computer screens that have been opened up in your day, it allows you to click the X's on all of those, right? And so when we sold it like that, we went around the room and how did that feel? And I got many hardened, battled senior NCOs to be like, I feel lighter. That was a win for me, right? They felt lighter because that's exactly what happens when you meditate. Whether it's 2 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, you're closing those computer screens. So we talked about reflective journaling, a pitch. You should do it. I don't have the time to really go into it, but I will go into the obituary. So I made them go home that night and write their obituary. This was a powerful exercise. I wasn't going to do it. I was forced to by another student, another mentor in the class. He told me I should do it, and so I did it. None of them had done it, and it actually led to, or none of them had thought like this before, and it led to a lot of tears on the last day. And I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, I just made them write their obituary, 20 lines, starting with the end in mind. Like, what do you want your life to look like in the end? And it was interesting. I did this exercise about 5 years ago. And I love the Air Force. I've been in it for 24 years, and I'm super proud. And my family has served right alongside of me. But my obituary had one line about the Air Force. It had about 5 lines about my wife. I think 4 lines about my kids. It was just funny. And I didn't start with any kind of preconceived notion. It really helped me focus on what's important in my life. And so it was a worthwhile exercise. All right. And then we did fitness, the self-care. All right. The next day, which should have been on day 1, the Brene Brown Netflix special, Vulnerability, Shame, Creativity, Joy, and Innovation. The exact environment we're trying to create in our organizations, she spells out very well. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. If you're going to take any developmental time in the next few months, go watch that video. I promise you. Let me know. I'll send you $1 if you didn't like it. All right, $2. Anyways, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. It's impactful. All right. So lesson 15 is when Colonel Bishop came in and got his time with the senior NCOs. So you're a leader of your company, and he got the outbrief from what's working, what's not working. Now, whether you do anything with that information, that's beside the point. They felt valued, and they got to talk to the boss about what they think the priorities, what's wrong and what's working. And to tell you, there's one thing that like Colonel Bishop could move out on right away, and he did it. And I've heard so much feedback, like, oh, they're listening to our feedback. Anyways, it's powerful. Then we did what Charlie said you guys didn't do, the OBO. I don't know if my organization is necessarily ready for the OBO. I'm still trying to get them to go through anonymous feedback and all those kind of things. If I was to do it over again, I probably wouldn't do the OBO. It sounds like they've cut it out of that class. I think it's a little more advanced and needs to be baked into the culture. So what I would do with that is I always forget IT. I would show them how to use the SurveyMonkey app. And if you're interested, like the only way to get better at something is to practice, right? And so I would have spent an hour making them create their little feedbacks that they're going to get. All right, rushing through because I want to get to your questions. We made them all do a yoga class. They all loved it. Which was again, hardened, battled senior NCOs. I thought they wouldn't, but we got them because we built an open mindset. All right, and then one of the most powerful things that you can do in your organization, we do it at Eielson, is this gratitude session. So in my office, in our front office, we try to get together every 2 weeks. I'd like to do it every week, but we get together, and I think you'll do it today. And we do a gratitude session, and we thank people for the small things that they have done for us. Not for these, hey, he saved a baby or any of these kind of things. Hey, thanks for coming to pick me up when my car was at the shop. Thanks for helping me out with that tasker that I had to get done. Thanks for helping me out with that paperwork that I had to do. We get very specific and we talk about those. This has had the most change I've seen out of any of this stuff. Because let's just say you guys, all of you in that room are going to have a gratitude session later this week. And you want to get up and share, and you're going to have to say something. What are you looking for throughout the week? You're looking for things that people have done for you. And that change in your focus changes your life. And so I have seen, as we've done this, as people get up there and share, other people are like, well, this person did this for me. This person did this. They're starting to see the million little things that people do for us every day. And when they change that focus from this expectation to a sense of gratitude, like, it has exploded our teamwork. Anyways, in our gratitude session here, I made them do a gratitude session for the 3 days they were there. Who helped them while they were there? These are 35, 40-year-old men. They were breaking down crying after 3 days. It was crazy. I did not expect it. Some of them are breaking down over their obituaries. I am not the father that I want to be. I am not the wife that I want to be. Anyways, I'm just, out of any of these things, that gratitude session, and I'm not saying it's the easiest, but I think it's the easiest to implement. Sit down once a week with your team and tell them what you're thankful for. Specific things, not, I'm thankful that you're alive. I'm thankful that you helped me with this. And it will change your culture. All right, and then the course reflection was just exactly what it was, course reflection. I won't bore you with it, but there's all kinds of, anonymous feedback. Read it. We used a net promoter score for a quantitative thing. How do you like this class? And you can read it there that they liked it better than Apple. So they really enjoyed it. So those were successes. The coaching sessions was successful. The what's working, what's not working, I already talked about all that. All right, recommended improvement areas. This was all on me. I need to create some, I can't create lesson plans because the only way to teach this is if you've done it. I would get spouses involved. We got to work out money for food. So this was one of the most powerful, you can read it in the feedback, one of the most powerful lessons, powerful classes they had ever been to, just like Next Jump was for me, because it gave me tools to actually work on things. Like I could leave Next Jump the next day and do things. I wanted that for them. The gap between theory and application is the Grand Canyon. It is far, but that's what we usually do in our classes is we teach theory. Hey, and then we take the last 5 minutes of the class. How are you going to apply this? What? It's too much. I wanted them to walk out of there with, whether they completely understood all the science, I gave them all the reference and all those books. Go read that. But you can do this today. You can do this tomorrow. You can do a gratitude session. You saw it, you practiced it, and now you can move out on it. So that was the goal. The ultimate goal was to help them create developmental gyms where they are taking every opportunity, like a teaching hospital, every opportunity to build on these human skills that we need to build the culture that all of us want in our organizations.